All right, so what I want to talk about today is basically the main point of the video is I'm gonna use an analogy. So the idea is that it's like being hypermobile is like driving a Dodge Viper. So if you know anything about the Dodge Viper, it's an extremely powerful car, but it was notorious for being like very dangerous essentially because it had very little driver aids. Like it had no traction control, no like electronic stability control, anything like that. So basically if you weren't being careful and you had a Dodge Viper, it was really easy to just like wrap yourself around a tree or a telephone pole, whatever. So I feel like being hypermobile is kind of the same way, because essentially the core of hypermobility is that your ligaments are essentially more lax than the average person. So if your ligaments are more lax, the main thing is, so obviously you're at a higher risk of tearing various tendons, ligaments, all sorts of stuff. But you're also, basically you have more range of motion in a lot of joints. Especially like, obviously knees, elbows hyperextend. But the thing is, if one joint is hypermobile, then it means all the joints are hypermobile, just due to it being basically a global kind of collagen. It's like the amount of type 1 versus type 2 collagen I think your body produces is different. So basically, my hypothesis is that if you train perfectly, if you're hypermobile and you train perfectly, you have perfect biomechanics, perfect everything, which is quite difficult and requires conscious training, because being hypermobile and not knowing about it and doing like PT from since you were a baby, basically you'll develop a lot of like compensations. Like for example, I thought I had flat feet for the longest time, but really it was just due to the bones in my feet being hypermobile, being more loose. I have to consciously contract my arch to have a stable base. And that's something like, for example, on split squats, I'll always like roll onto the outside of my foot and have to consciously fight to keep my big toe and like first metatarsal down, just because like I have so much external rotation in my hip, it just wants to like fall out that way. So basically, okay, I'm kind of rambling now, but the point is that hypermobility, it has to use the video game kind of term of having a skill floor and a skill ceiling, I'd say the skill floor for like athleticism of being hypermobile is definitely a lot lower than not being hypermobile, because you don't have that baseline level of sort of knowing where your body is, that protection from strong ligaments, which also provide feedback for the brain for like proprioception. But the thing is, I believe that if you train properly, you can essentially, I think the skill ceiling for hypermobility is higher in some cases compared to, in some athletic disciplines compared to not being hypermobile. Because obviously stuff like pure like 1 foot jumping, pure bounce, pure like anything where it's like probably like high jump where it's like pure tendon elasticity and like recoil, if you're hypermobile, you'll never be better at that, because that just your ligaments got to be tight to just rebound all that force. But I think in something like, take for example basketball, like you see a lot of players now, there are a lot of players who are not necessarily the most the most bouncy or the most springy, but they're very good players because they know they're flexible in the hips, they can drive at a lot of different angles, they can get super low, get in a super wide stance and explode. Like, look at like someone like Derrick Rose, jumped super fucking high, but obviously he tore his ACL, yeah, and that was a career-ending injury, and it was never the same. Versus looking at players like Luka Doncic or Jalen Brunson, where they're not necessarily the most springy or like pure explosive power, but they just know they're just mobile in a kind of different way, in a kind of awkward way. And I think a lot, because hypermobility is a spectrum. It's not necessarily that you're disabled or you're not. It's just the degree of how loose your joints are. It's like a spectrum. So if you're further more on the hypermobile side of the spectrum, I think it's not necessarily, it's just you have to approach it in a different way. So yeah, that was the main idea of this talk, is that the skill floor is lower, but the skill ceiling is high in certain areas. So, and I believe that with the proper training, any hypermobile people can use that to their advantage.